Ever since the release of Kafka, there has been something that has been on my mind. Is the erudition the worst path in the game? I think to understand exactly how the erudition functions, we have to understand the roles of all the classes or paths in Honkai Star Rail. The erudition is known for AoE damage, meaning they're targeting multiple enemies at once. The destruction is known for their damage and survivability. The hunt is known for their large DPS screenshots in the form of single target damage. The harmony path is known as the buffers for all the damage classes in the game. The nihility is known as the offensive debuffers to all of the other damage classes in the game, although you could argue that the Nihility has a bunch of characters that can do pretty decent amounts of damage. The Preservation is known as defensive options. And then the Abundance is also known as defensive options, with Luocha being an exception to the rule, a character that has a lot of utility alongside that defensive option. So let's take a character like Himiko, for example. She excels at doing AoE damage to enemies that have the fire weakness. I think we all know that at this point. She has a bunch of damage built into her multipliers. Her ultimate does a decent amount of damage. It's not the most in the world compared to other classes in the game, but if you take into consideration that you may hit 5 enemies at once with this ultimate, you're going to be doing this 184%, or depending on the level of your ultimate, times 5, or depending on the amount of enemies that are on the field. And then Himiko has an elemental skill that does a decent amount of damage. But the honest truth is, with the adjacent damage doing a lower percentage of the initial damage to the initial target, it feels like the elemental skills are not as good as they should be. And then Himiko also has a follow-up attack, which does a large chunk of damage whenever the enemy has their weakness broken 3 times and Himiko's on the field. So you have a character that does a decent amount of AoE damage. I would say Himiko is one of the best AoE damage dealers in the game. But the problem is that we haven't had a real use for pure AoE damage dealers. And if we did, they needed to put out mass amounts of AoE damage to keep up with other damage dealer characters and other damage dealing paths. When we take a look at a character like QQ, QQ has a lot going for her. She's a part of the Erudition Path, as you all know, but she is a character of the Quantum Element, being one of the strongest, most broken elements in the game. She also has extremely high damage numbers, and she has access to one of the best sets in the game, the Quantum Damage Bonus set. So the truth is, QQ is an exception to the rule. If you have some eidolons for the character, if you have some of the best offensive debuffers, some of the best offensive buffers, then you have for a character that is going to be a very strong hyper carry AoE damage dealer. So you take a look at a character like Herda, when you look at this character, you think that she should be a very strong damage dealer, because the truth is she has a giant hammer. She's the only character in the game that smacks you with the giant hammer. But the unfortunate truth is that the giant hammer hits like a blow up one. It doesn't really do that much damage compared to all the other AoE damage dealers in the game. Even if you have her Eidolon 6, this character needs so much investment to make work, or to keep up with other damage dealers in the game. And the honest truth is, there isn't very many light code options for the Erudition Path. You have one that increases the ultimate damage of the wearer by 56% at max levels, but it is a 3-star light cone. You have free-to-play options that increase the damage dealt by the wearer, which counts as elemental damage bonus, which is nice. And then whenever you defeat an enemy, you get your attack increase. But compared to other 4-star options in the game, like a very strong Nihility Light Cone that gives you a damage bonus that stacks up to 3 times, which greatly outclasses that of the damage dealing path of the Erudition. So a path that has some of the worst scaling damage dealers and some of the worst light cones, with some being exception to the rule. Jing is a character that is actually able to put out a mass amount of damage as an AoE damage dealer. Ever since his release in the game, he's been a very nice electric AoE damage dealer for many people. He also does a good amount of AoE damage in the form of single target to like 2 to 3 adjacent enemies. It's very valuable in fights where you use a character like Silverwolf alongside Jing Yuan. But then when you look at Jing's Light Cone, his best in slot 5-star Before Dawn, you realize that he has the best Erudition Light Cone in the game. I mean, of course, he's a limited 5-star character, so it only makes sense that he has access, or he debuts with the best erudition option in the game. But this light cone is a mass damage increase for every single erudition character in the game. And if you don't have this light cone, then you're missing out on the best option in the game for the erudition characters, because it is extremely versatile. However, ever since the release of Kafka, she's been a character that has exceeded the expectations of most players. She's a character that has done too much with such little effort. She's a character that excels like other damage dealers but with lower investments. She is a character that does it all. The honest truth is, Kafka being an AoE damage dealer of the light and element, while also being able to put dots onto the enemy, which further increases her damage output, is a character that, at first glance, might seem like she does more AoE damage than a character like Jing. And the honest truth is, for now, she does. She's a character that has power creep Jing for now. The truth is, a character like Kafka can easily be power crept herself, or should I say, be easily disabled. The truth is, if there ever was a mechanic introduced in Hawkeye Star Rail like there was in other turn-based gacha games, or other turn-based games you're familiar with, to where you can't put a debuff on the enemy, then you have it to where a character like Kafka is literally useless. That is, unless a character like Pela is able to remove that buff from the enemy, which she can do, but it only needs to be a buff that you can remove. And if you can't remove that buff, then there is no hope for a character like Kafka. But I do see those situations working out really well for the character, because if you have a character that can remove a buff from the enemy while also being able to put defense down on the enemy team wide, then you have a very broken combo in those circumstances. So the Erudition Path seems very bad right now, and just like the Path of Destruction, they will have their time to shine, it's just not right now. All of the characters here have their place in the game. A character like Himiko works really well with Herta as a farmer, but you also can use Himiko in situations where the enemy has fire weaknesses. I like to use my Himiko alongside Kafka, who work as a very good duo with one another. And then a character like Herta can be used alongside Kafka as well, but the truth is why would you use a character like Herta when there is other options in the game, like Pela for instance? And then there is a character like Serval that can be used alongside Kafka as well, because Kafka can detonate those dots that Serval puts onto the enemy, while also being a part of the same element. So it's these two characters working really well together. And then the character like QQ has her place to shine, being probably the highest damage dealer here, in the form of AoE, also a very nice character to use alongside Silverwolf and other quantum characters, maybe even Yuan in the future. And then Jing is a character that is a very solid damage dealer. I don't think this character will ever be bad, because the truth is, unlike Kafka, he doesn't put any debuffs on the enemy. And I'll be honest, I'd be more scared of a character that can put debuffs on the enemy versus a character that can't put debuffs on the enemy. Because if that's how you do most of your damage, there might come a time where you won't be doing any damage. And truth be told, Hoyoverse is too obsessed with Nihility right now. I mean, we're getting a 5-star Nihility light cone in the near future. So an Erudition light code isn't coming anytime soon, so to speak. But when that does get added to the game, you can bet a lot of your favorite Erudition characters will be able to utilize the light cone. And I expect them to make it versatile like the other light cones we have currently. Maybe the Destruction one isn't that good for a character like Blade, but Blade is an exception to the rule because he scales on HP, whereas other characters in that path scale on attack. So is the Path of Erudition a class of characters that are pointless? I would say that. I would say it's a class of characters that haven't had their time to shine, just like the Destruction characters. Some are always going to be exceptions to the rule. A character like Jing can be used in situations where you use Kafka as well. A character like Himiko can be used alongside Kafka, or in situations where the enemy has fire weakness and there's a mass amount of enemies. A character like QQ can be used alongside Silverwolf. She also has access to all of the other best supporters in the game, so a character like that is just an exception to the rule here. But the truth is, we're just waiting for more options in that path and want the path to become more free-to-play friendly. Because right now, let's be honest, the path is pretty much whale bait. That's it, thank you for watching, and have a nice rest of your day. Peace.